Since the war began, Ukraine's missile industry has advanced significantly. The country has recently revealed a wide range of exciting new explosive weapons, such as the Sapsan, Ukraine's first-ever homemade ballistic missile, and the extended-range Flamingo missile. Now, a new addition has joined the arsenal, a peculiar pot-bellied weapon that Russia stands no chance of stopping, and it is aimed directly at Moscow. The official designation for this new missile remains unconfirmed, but its distinctive bulging shape has led military analysts to quickly nickname it the Puffy Neptune. As this nickname suggests, it is yet another variant of the well-known Ukrainian Neptune missile. The R-360 Neptune is a family of Ukrainian cruise missiles developed by the Luch Design Bureau in Kyiv, which officially entered service with the Ukrainian Navy in 2021, just a year before the Russian invasion started. The original Neptune was designed exclusively as an anti-ship missile. Its design drew from the old Soviet Kh-35 anti-ship missile, but the Neptune offered superior range and overall better capabilities. It was able to strike ships over 170 miles away, carrying a 330-pound warhead and dealing severe damage to any target in its path. When the war started, Ukraine realized it had a desperate need for more missiles capable of striking land-based targets, so its military engineers began the work of modifying the Neptune for land attacks. The development of this new land attack Neptune was fast-tracked, and by 2023 it had entered service. Soon after, Ukraine started exploring additional ways to improve its Neptune missiles. In late 2023, development teams began working on the long Neptune variant, with the goal of extending the missile's range from 170 miles to over 600 miles. Although it took some time, the work on this new long-range variant was ultimately successful. The first official reports of the long Neptune in action surfaced earlier this year, and in March 2025, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced the project's completion. The long Neptune was also featured in an Instagram video published this year as part of Ukraine's Independence Day celebrations, which showed just how much larger and wider this new variant is compared to the original. Now, a glimpse of an entirely new type of Neptune missile has been revealed, one that also has a very different appearance from the original. This so-called Puffy Neptune was displayed for the Lithuanian delegation in Kyiv on October 7th. The delegation was also shown some other pieces of Ukrainian military equipment, like the Peklo aerial drone and the Magura V-7 uncrewed naval boat, but the new Neptune stands out as the most compelling piece of hardware on display. While the Ukrainian Defense Ministry has yet to release any precise details or technical specifications for this new Neptune, the photographs shared online by Defense Minister Denis Shmyhal have already become a topic of intense debate among military analysts. Until there is official confirmation about this new Neptune missile, its capabilities remain a matter of speculation. A few things, however, seem almost certain. For one, this is undoubtedly a different Neptune variant than any seen before. This is made clear by the two prominent bulges on either side of the missile's midsection, located just ahead of the main fins. These bulges are not present on the original R-360 Neptune, nor are they visible on any images or videos of the long Neptune. An educated guess can also be made about the purpose of these bulges. The main theory currently circulating in military analysis circles is that the bulges are formed by a pair of conformal fuel tanks, or CFTs, fitted to the missile's body. CFTs are frequently fitted to aircraft, like fighter jets. They are specially designed to blend with the aircraft's profile, providing the extra fuel needed to travel greater distances without significantly disrupting its aerodynamics. It appears this may be the case here, and the bulges on the Puffy Neptune certainly call to mind the same kind of curved protrusions seen on certain fighter jet models with CFTs, such as the Eurofighter Typhoon and the F-15EX Eagle II. There are two primary reasons why Ukraine's forces would want to add more fuel to the Neptune missile. The first, and arguably the most likely, is for extended range. With two bonus fuel tanks attached to its sides, this Puffy Neptune could, in theory, travel much farther than a standard R-360. Of course, a long-range version of the Neptune already exists, the Long Neptune, which is capable of traveling over 600 miles before hitting its targets. However, the Long Neptune is considerably larger than the standard model. It is said to measure nearly 20 feet, which is several feet longer than the original's 16.6-foot length. The Long Neptune is also broader, with some sections reaching a thickness of about 20 inches, while the original is 15 inches wide at its thickest point. Long Neptunes also carry larger warheads than the originals, weighing 570 pounds, which is almost twice the size of the standard Neptune warhead. These differences mean that Long Neptunes are inevitably more costly to produce and may not be as easy to launch as the originals. They require new or specially adapted launch platforms, which will demand time, money, and manpower to create. In the meantime, since Ukraine has been using the regular Neptunes for much longer, it already has the necessary infrastructure in place for quick and efficient launches. This might be the explanation for the puffy Neptune's existence. It is not yet clear exactly how large this missile is, but some analysts have suggested it is closer in size to a standard Neptune than a Long Neptune. If so, this means it could theoretically be fired from the same launchers used for regular Neptunes, but it could travel significantly farther, allowing Ukraine to strike long-distance targets and conduct more effective explosive deep strikes on Russia without always having to use its Long Neptune arsenal. This is precisely what analyst Ole Katkov of Defense Express theorized in a recent interview with Radio NV Pavlo Novikov. We now have 3 Neptunes: the standard R-360 anti-ship missile, the Long Neptune with a 1,000-kilometer range, and the new chubby Neptune, which has noticeable bulges on the sides. The only logical explanation for these bulges is additional fuel tanks integrated into the body. They're not jettisoned. They're part of the missile's structure, protruding beyond the standard diameter. The Long Neptune is about 1.5 meters longer and has a larger diameter, 50 cm versus 38 cm for the standard Neptune. The chubby Neptune is similar in size to the standard Neptune except for these extra side tanks. The purpose is clear. More fuel means greater range, or the same range, but with a heavier warhead. As Katkov notes, the alternative explanation for the fuel tank bulges on the puffy or chubby Neptune is that it may be equipped with a larger warhead than the original. This would mean that the new Neptune might not travel any farther than the original, keeping its peak range around the 170-mile mark. However, with a larger warhead, this missile could inflict much more devastating damage on whatever targets it hits. This, too, would be a major advantage for Ukraine. With a more powerful variant of the Neptune in its arsenal, it could launch even more destructive attacks on Russian targets that are relatively close by, in occupied territories, for example, along the front lines, or even short distances beyond the border. Ukraine has already built an amazing track record of using its missiles and drones to launch one strike after another on Russian targets. Its intelligence services are doing a remarkable job of identifying the locations that are most vital to the Kremlin, like high-value oil refineries, production plants, pipelines, and storage facilities for fuel or ammunition, and taking them out one by one. However, much of the damage in these attacks is caused by drones, and they are not truly capable of completely destroying large pieces of infrastructure. A major missile strike, however, with new and improved puffy Neptunes, could be exactly what is needed to take these types of high-value Russian infrastructure off the map for good. So, if the extra fuel is purely there to compensate for the additional weight of a larger warhead, it is still a fantastic addition to Ukraine's missile arsenal. However, many analysts argue that the more likely scenario here is that the puffy Neptune has the same size warhead as a standard Neptune, and that the extra fuel tanks exist purely to extend its range, essentially giving Ukraine a kind of middle ground weapon between the original Neptune and the Long Neptune. As Katkov puts it, if the standard R-360 Neptune flies about 300 kilometers, and the Long Neptune 1,000 kilometers, then the logical gap to fill is around 500 kilometers. So my cautious assumption is that the chubby Neptune either flies roughly 500 kilometers or maintains the 300-kilometer range but carries a significantly heavier warhead than the baseline version. Defense Express appears to agree with this assessment, writing, "The thickening is, with a high degree of probability, conformal fuel tanks, which allow to increase the missile's flight range. Recall that the R360 has a declared range of 208 kilometers, for the long Neptune, 1,000 kilometers. Therefore, taking into account the classic gradations of target ranges, it would be quite logical to assume that the puffy Neptune flies at 500 kilometers. 500 kilometers is equivalent to about 310 miles. Certain parts of Ukraine, like the northeastern regions, are less than 300 miles from Moscow, as the crow flies. This means that if the experts' assessments are accurate, Moscow could well be within range of this new puffy Neptune missile. The standard Neptune has never been able to reach that far, but the new variant almost certainly could, and that could make it a game-changing force for Ukraine as the war rages on. Because even though the standard Neptune is an excellent missile and has proven itself on numerous occasions, it has been used to take out Russian frigates and other naval vessels, for example, as well as wiping Russian radars and air defense systems off the map. It has always been limited by range. It can only go so far, and Russia knows that. Consequently, Kremlin commanders have smartly repositioned important assets like high-value radars and so on deeper into their own territory. They have also ensured that new infrastructure, like military production plants, is built further back in Russia's inner regions, making these locations impossible to strike with standard Neptunes alone. And even when Ukraine received other missiles from its allies in NATO and across Europe, many of them also had the same limited range. Storm Shadow missiles, for instance, supplied by the UK and France, can only fly around 155 miles to reach their targets, while America's ATACMS can hit targets around 190 miles away. Plus, Allied nations have historically imposed rules and restrictions on how Ukraine can use their weapons, and for a long time, Kyiv did not have permission to deploy NATO weapons on Russian soil. Thus, the country has always been restricted in some way when it comes to missiles. This is a big reason why Ukraine has worked so hard, dedicating so much time and effort to improve its domestic missile programs and capabilities, unveiling exciting additions like the Puffy Neptune, the Long Neptune, and others, to break through those barriers and overcome the obstacles that have stood in its way for too long. Now, with new missiles in the ranks, there is no telling how much damage Ukraine could do. So many locations that the Russians thought were safe are now within range, not just of Long Neptunes, but likely of the Puffy Neptune too. And with two similar but distinctly different threats to worry about, the Kremlin will have no way of knowing when, where, and how Ukraine might strike next. The best part of all this is that despite having only just seen some of the first official images of this new Puffy Neptune, it is already said to be ready to be rolled out onto the battlefield and used in strikes against Russia. When unveiling the missile, Ukraine's defense minister, Denis Shmyhal, stated that the foreign guests saw ready-made solutions that strike the enemy at the front and in the rear. Our manufacturers presented their own products, which can be produced in partner countries tomorrow within the framework of the Build with Ukraine program. Drones, ammunition, missiles, robots, artillery and armored vehicles are what we are producing now and what we are ready to produce together with partners. We call on partner states to invest in building the arsenal of the free world. Build together with Ukraine. Ukraine's weapons are the weapons of the free world. In other words, this new missile, along with the other weapons and military hardware shown off in Kyiv, is ready to launch and could even be produced in allied nations without any notable delay. This suggests that Ukraine has the capacity to make a good number of Puffy Neptunes, massively strengthening its missile stocks and possibly paving the way towards even more frequent and impactful deep strikes against Russian targets in the weeks and months to come. Already, reports indicate the enormous impact of these kinds of attacks. Right now, for example, a gigantic fuel crisis is ongoing in numerous Russian regions, and its effects are spreading fast, far and wide across the vast nation. In western, central, and even far eastern regions, along with occupied territories like Crimea, gas stations are having to either shut down entirely or impose strict limitations, controlling how much fuel the average customer is allowed to buy. Some of them are setting specific quantity limits. Others are blocking purchases unless customers have loyalty cards. Many are utterly unable to provide the usual range of fuel options or sufficient quantities to meet the high levels of demand, and Russian motorists are lining up for hours on end just to buy even half a tank full of gas. Prices are also skyrocketing right now, and in some areas, as well as on the black market, Russians may have to pay up to half the national median salary just to refuel their cars. This is due to several factors, like Western sanctions imposed on Russia, and the fact that many nations across Europe and beyond have stopped buying Russian oil. But by far the biggest contributing factor to the ongoing crisis is the fact that Ukraine has repeatedly used its drones and missiles to seek out and strike at Russian oil refineries and other fuel industry infrastructure. Time and time again, Ukraine has struck hard at places like pipelines, oil tanks, and fuel storage facilities. Russia may not have felt the impact of those attacks right away, but it is definitely feeling it now. In fact, some expert estimates suggest that the country has lost up to 38% of its oil refining capacity, which works out to around 338,000 tons of oil every single day. Gasoline output has dropped by a staggering 1 million tons too, and about 70% of these outages and production cuts are directly linked to Ukraine's attacks. And if Ukraine can do all of that just with relatively cheap and simple drones, carrying quite small warheads, just imagine how much more havoc it could cause for the Kremlin with high-powered missiles, like the puffy Neptune. Even if it is carrying the standard Neptune warhead, which weighs in at around 330 pounds, that would be enough to reduce entire buildings to piles of rubble, or trigger gigantic explosions and fires after a direct hit on an oil refinery or similar location. What's more, Ukraine could easily combine puffy Neptune attacks with drone strikes, using the drones as cover, just as Russia regularly does with its own attacks on Kyiv and other cities, then following up with the missiles to deal the knockout blow. Of course, there is still much to learn about this new Neptune variant, and official confirmation from Ukraine's military or defense ministry is needed about exactly what it is and what it is capable of. Its true size needs to be established to see how it measures up to the existing Neptune models, for example, as well as its maximum range and the size of its warhead. Confirmation is also needed about the true purpose of those Potbelly-style bulges on the body, though it is almost guaranteed that they are concealing additional fuel tanks. Once more information is available, it will be possible to make accurate assessments of this missile's potential and predictions about how it might be used moving forward. But one thing is certain: this new Neptune is one of several powerful additions to Ukraine's missile stocks, alongside the likes of the Sapsan, Long Neptune, and Flamingo, all of which boast their own exciting benefits. The Sapsan, for example, can travel at 4 times the speed of sound, or around 3,100 miles per hour. The Long Neptune hits targets hundreds of miles away with flawless precision. The Flamingo is reported to be able to go even further, with the ability to strike almost every major military base and high-value piece of Kremlin infrastructure all over Russia. With all these new missiles, Ukraine is getting stronger, right as Russia grows weaker. The Kremlin is losing troops at record rates and watching its economy go up in flames as its oil refineries burn and the fuel crisis deepens. The tide of the war is well and truly turning, and Ukraine is in the ascendancy. The only question left is when and where will the puffy Neptune strike first, if it has not been used already. Learn more about the dire situation in which the Kremlin finds itself in our recent video, looking at how September was a veritable month of hell for Vladimir Putin and his Kremlin underlings. Or check out this video detailing how Russia is so desperate, it is even having to resort to sending soldiers into battle on horseback. Make sure to subscribe to our channel too, so you can stay in the know about everything that is going on along the front lines of Ukraine and beyond.